We are going to speak a lot about longevity today and how not only the physical and mental side and how you approach that and view that. And you have also had some fertility problems in your life.
Absolutely.
How does that fertility challenge translate or change how you show up in your life present day?
Ooh. That's such a great question. So, yes, I struggled with fertility. Again, getting back to growing up in the late 80s and 90s, when you turned 18 as a woman back then, they just put you on the pill. You have tough periods, we're putting you on birth control. You have cramping, we're going to put you on birth control. So I was on the birth control pill from about age 19, and then I was on it for 14 years, probably was put on every time a new one came out and that pharmaceutical company was pushing it. Suddenly my doctor's like, oh, let's change to this one. So I probably tried 6 or 7 different iterations of the birth control pill, which, as we know, your body's not actually having real periods. It's just a mile marker. So the pill impacts women's bodies very differently, particularly when you're at a young age. And I think I never thought about that. I just thought, oh, this is normal. This is what all women do. So when I went off the pill years before even trying to get pregnant, because I noticed it was impacting my body in a negative way. I noticed stress. I noticed either weight loss or weight gain. And I was getting more savvy as I hit my 30s to understand what my body should feel like. And this did not feel good for me. So when I went off it and then we did try our fertility journey, beforehand, my husband and I, really thought having children was a big part of our plan and of our destiny. But since the fertility challenges, I've realized that my calling is actually different. And the maternal instincts I have transcended having my own genetic children to nurturing humans and giving birth to things like my fitness programs, my longevity programs that allow women, and a lot of my demographic is moms, help them create and encourage their next generation. And also in speaking about my infertility challenges, hopefully normalizing it for women, because when I was going through it, no one was talking about it. There must be something wrong with you if you weren't able to conceive. Even I was in my late 30s, but now it's considered geriatric pregnancy, of course, over 35. But so I think now my relationship to life since my fertility challenges has been repurposing what I actually want, right? In my mind, it looked like this, having kids with my husband. But God, the universe, source, energy, all of which I believe in, any of which you might believe in, had a different plan for me. And I really believe that if we're tuned in, if we're listening to our body, creating body literacy, creating emotional and intellectual literacy, I really believe if we're connected and doing the growth work to become our highest self in any given moment, that the universe does have our back. And it's going to say, oh, this thing you wanted, yeah, that's not for you. That's not for your highest purpose. And it's not your best way to contribute to the world. So we're going to take that away. We're going to close that door and we're going to guide you over here where now instead of one child of my own, I'm able to reach billions of moms, billions of women, millions of humans with my programming. And that's my destiny. And I think this is one of those examples, if we get into mindset later and becoming super attractors, or Dr. Joe Dispenza's becoming supernatural, this is one of the ways that we can really get in tune with what we're meant for, which may not always be according to our plan.
You go from thinking, this is the path my life is going to take. This is where I'm going to be. I'm going to be a mother at some point in my life. And that's how you're going to manifest these maternal instincts.
Yeah.
What does that look like when you recognize that that's no longer in the cards and that you need to shift and pivot?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a process. I definitely went through grief. So I went through all the steps of loss and grief, from denial. No, I'm sorry. You must have the test results wrong. This can't possibly be my outcome. And then, so essentially my husband and I tried naturally for a while, checking my ovulation, checking my temperature, going to acupuncture, drinking all the teas, the fertility teas and things like that. And when it wasn't happening and it became more clinical like that, it stopped having the romance and the love. It was like, I'm ovulating right now. Stop what you're doing. Let's go make it happen. And I kind of knew in my heart, if I was really connected, that wasn't the way. But we did do that for a couple years. And then when I went into IVF, we spent what was a lot of our savings at the time. This is before I had some breakthroughs in my career. My husband has, a regular 9-to-5 sales job. So it was a huge financial investment for us. So to put that investment, then of course the emotional and physical investment of more hormonal treatment, more doctor's visits, when it didn't work. And it was a unique scenario because we did get a lot of eggs. My body produced a lot of eggs. They did the genetic testing on 12 eggs, which is huge for a woman at the time. I was 40. And they all came back with multiple chromosomal abnormalities, which means infertility. It means that the quality of my eggs were not going to produce a healthy baby. Sometimes people redo IVF because it's simply a numbers game. But what I was told, not only did my IVF not work, but I was never going to have a child. And I think for me, I almost needed that definitive, this is not happening for you. And again, I do believe that if women get those results, but they are determined to have a child, they can. That's another story. But for me, I accepted it. And I think I sort of started to realize, okay, I'm accepting this because something in me tells me this is right. I gave it my all. We invested all our money, our time, our energy, and our health into it. It didn't happen. I need to pivot. But there were 6 weeks in between there where I sat in a dark room eating Ben & Jerry's and Entenmann's cookies, and I rewatched the entire 10 seasons of Game of Thrones. So you can imagine how long, in a dark room where I cried and cried. I mean, I definitely have generalized anxiety disorder, which I've dealt with, but I've never felt depressed. Not at the end of my theater career, not suffering other losses. I was depressed. And, I'm so thankful to my husband, Nolan, who allowed me the space to feel that way and would come in and say, okay, honey, today we're going to take a shower. Oh, no, I don't want to leave this room. Today we're going to take a shower. Just, that's all. We'd go to, okay, today we're going to walk Larkin. We're going to go outside for 5 minutes. No, I don't want to go. We're just going to, just 5 minutes. And helped me progress out of that, but simultaneously gave me the space to feel that. And my husband is younger than me, right? So he's 7 years younger. Along with the depression, had this guilt that I'm depriving my husband, who of course has super sperm as the test results. So it's my fault. What's wrong with me? And I would verbalize to him, I understand if you want to leave me. And if you want to find someone who's younger who can give this to you, I understand. And I remember those feelings, and they come up even when I don't expect them to, when I talk about it. And he just looked at me like I was crazy and was like, I love you and I want to build a life with you. And he's like, I didn't have dreams of having children. I wanted to create a family with you. And so for me, that was, I think a lot of my turning point in realizing family can look like whatever we want it to. And I think as women, our first response to many things is, it's my fault. Oh, this person doesn't understand me. What did I do wrong? It's a fawn response. It's a people-pleasing response. It's something's fundamentally wrong with me if I can't make my body do something that it should be able to do. So I think allowing myself that time of grief was pivotal. And then I think my husband reflecting my worth back to me was necessary at the time too. And
I think it's a testament to who he is as a person as well.
I mean, no question. My husband and I could not be more different in most ways. He has all the qualities I value, which is loyalty, understanding, patience. And speaking of longevity, I'm 48. He looks at me like I'm the most beautiful woman that ever existed. I will point out my flaws to him. Oh, do I need a facial? He's like, I think you look so beautiful. I think you get more beautiful every year. And he believes it. So he has been an amazing tool in reflecting my worth back to me, which I think is important. And, I wouldn't have been able to do any of the things that have happened in my career in the past 8 years, which has been, I've been lucky to create and have support in having, a career that's taken off in the direction I hoped. If I was pregnant, if I had had a child, I would have had to say no to my first opportunity from Beachbody because I would have been 3 months pregnant when they wanted me to create a barre program. So again, I think processing it and looking at my life as not, oh, it's not turning out the way I want, but oh, how can I take this need and translate it into something different?
Speaking of the input itself,
yeah.
So the expectation of things are going to be one way, but they end up going a different way, and they often turn out better than you could have imagined with how things did transit or transmute. How do you view pivots, or how do you view what's the internal monologue look like in those moments where this is what I think my life is going to be, but I now have to shift and pivot? Is that conscious in the moment, or is that something that you go off of a gut feel?
I think it starts off conscious and a practice that we have to practice, and then in combination with a gut feel. I am a Scorpio. I am all water signs. My sun sign, my moon sign, my rising sign. I'm very emotional, very emotionally intuitive. And so when I trust my gut, when my gut tells me something, every time I've listened, it's been right. So I think that's important. For women as well, women's intuition it's a real thing. We've been conditioned and programmed out of it by society, and we've oftentimes been programmed to trust what society tells us instead. So I think there is a gut component aspect, but everything about the pivot is your mindset. I know plenty of people whose fertility journey didn't turn out the way they wanted, and they shifted right into a victim mentality and just didn't have the tools or didn't explore the tools to get out of it. A lot of people the same way. It's the monologue they tell themselves, I'll never be a mom, or, oh, I'll never make money, or, oh, that's great for you, but it'll never happen for me. And I really believe what we speak about, we give power to. What we think about, we give power to. And what we tell ourselves and the mindset work we do is what we give power to. And so I would say the pivot is the mindset of, okay, I've given myself this time to process whatever it is. My vocal injury that ended my theater career, fertility journey. I got married very young when I was still doing shows to a Broadway star, and that did not go as planned either, and that was a heartbreak for me. And each of the times I thought, okay, what this is an opportunity to refocus. And then it was about diving back into me. Sometimes we lose ourselves in partnerships. Sometimes we lose ourselves in career. Sometimes we lose ourselves in what society expects of us. So every time I've pivoted, I've gone back to look inward. What do I really want? Is what I really want a child, or is what I really want to create something of value in this world that is a legacy and that can help people? So I think it's a little bit of both, but I think having the tools to shift your mindset is key.
Where does that come from for you? The tool specifically, or do you have a process that you go through that has continued to compound upon?
Yeah, I think, again, a little bit of both. I would say my original guru is my dad. My dad is one of those people who is just a grounded spiritual being. And when I was first doing theater in New York, it's a hustle. And there's about 7,000 other blonde women the same age as you, with the same talents as you, going in for the same 2 parts as you. And I would hustle. I've always been a hard worker. So I would be, getting my Backstage magazine for $1.99, circling the auditions and going to all of them while cocktail waitressing or bartending at night, while working HR jobs through a temp agency during the day to make the money to live in New York City. And like you, I wanted to live in Manhattan. I lived in a 6-foot by 8-foot space separated from a bookshelf by 2 other roommates when I moved there. But I was like, I'm in Manhattan. I'm living on the Upper West Side. This is my dream. This is where I want to be. But I would get discouraged going to all these auditions, and I'd get a lot of callbacks, but nothing at first. And I remember calling my dad and being like, oh, I can't wait till this happens so I can relax and so I can be happy. And my dad he's a man of few words, but those words are impactful. And, I was probably 21 or 22. And he said, Elise, happiness is not a destination. He's like, you have to find happiness in this time. You have to find happiness in going to the auditions, and you cannot let these rejections define whether or not you're happy, right? I knew enough that these auditions weren't going to define me, who I am, but I did allow my happiness to be impacted by external circumstances. And that was probably the first time at 22, because I hadn't dealt with a lot of rejection before, went to college at William & Mary, studied, did well at the ballet company I grew up in. So this was, you're talking multiple rejections a day, dozens of rejections a week. And that's when I started to realize, oh, I get to control my happiness. What is that? For me, it started with gratitude. And again, gratitude and service. In New York City, you could do something called New York Cares, where you didn't have to commit to like a weekly service, but I could go in and say, oh, this homeless shelter, they need someone to help serve soup tonight. And I would go and do that. And I realized service was a huge part of my happiness. And I've heard a couple other motivational speakers now say things like, when you need help, the best thing you can do is be helpful. So I think gratitude for the abundance I have, and kind of shifting into that mindset, I would then get excited about going to auditions and be able to release attachment to the outcome. And similar in my fertility journey and similar in my career, I've had to do that a few times. And then the process became a morning routine that expanded and expanded from just a gratitude journal to waking up. And these are the days before social media. So, you only had in-person interactions. I barely had a cell phone. Back then you had an answering service or a pager. So it was really about kind of controlling and being aware of what I allowed to be my input. This idea of inputs only. I wasn't going to turn on the news and hear catastrophes all the time. It was 9/11. I was downtown. I was 21 or 22 when 9/11 happened. Just moved to New York. I was downtown when it happened. I had to walk, 120 almost blocks home through an empty Times Square, and every Circuit City window showed the Pentagon on fire, and there was no communication. All cell service was shut down. And I thought that was likely to be the last day of my life. And I remember in that moment also, as I walked through the empty Times Square, thinking, okay, I feel like my life is just beginning, but this might be the end. Have I lived it in a way that I'm proud of? Have I taken risks? Have I put myself out there? And it was interesting, Kevin, because there was a piece that happened. Like, if this is my time, I'm okay. And then that also fueled how I did things. But, the aftermath of the news was a lot. So I would have to regulate. I'd go on like news cleanses. And what am I allowing to be inputs into my mind? I wanted it to be not, Pollyanna positivity, but I wanted it to be an awareness and to focus on what's going right and how I can contribute to what's happening in the world with 9/11. And that was volunteer work. It was giving blood. It was bringing food by the local firehouses with my friend who was dating a fireman at the time, and turning these, what could be very negative or oppressive inputs, into positive and contributing outputs.
I love, though, that you think of input not just as like what I consume.
Yeah.
But yes, as what you consume, but in multiple different facets.
Oh,
so
yeah.
What you consume in television, what you consume on social, what you put into your body,
Absolutely.
Who you're speaking to, and all of these different inputs. Do you, in regards to the inputs too, and a common theme that I've seen, specifically, I lost my mom when I was very young, but specifically in facing rejection through acting, and then having to face that perceived mortality at an early age.
Yeah.
Do you think that has allowed you to continue to show up and take a step towards what you want to do every day, rather than saying this is the life that's been designed for me?
Absolutely. I've never gone for the life that was designed for me. My parents are amazing. They both have PhDs and law degrees. They went to Columbia for their postdocs in New York City, which is why I was born there. They are academics, and they're amazing. They're also both artistic. My mom played guitar and my dad writes children's stories, which are actually quite amazing. And I would walk through New York City. When I was a very young child, he would make up stories about the gargoyles and about the trains, and very creative. But, again, this is back in the day where you went to college. That was not a question. And having academic parents and having this child who was very soulful and would talk about feelings and emotions a lot, and, really wanted to perform and dance. And this was not a real career. My mom in particular was like, well, this is fun and this is great. We want you to be creative, but that's a hobby. It's not a career. And I was like, oh no, it's going to be my career, But the parameters set for me were, when I went to college, I was pre-med. I mean, I had options: pre-med, pre-law, or business school. Like that, those were your three options for careers in my household, and quite honestly, in the 90s, right? But I knew in my heart, I'm like, I'm never going to sit at a desk. And I knew this. I remember age 5, 6. So this is maybe kindergarten, first grade, where they'd show the different jobs. I'm like, yeah, no, that's not for me. I'm sitting at this desk between 7 a.m. and 3 p.m. I'm not going to do this once I'm done with school. I'll never sit at a desk again. So I always kind of had that in me. And, I had parents who supported that, but were also protective of my well-being, and were very nervous when I moved to New York right after I graduated college. So I think I've always had that in me, but definitely having the experience of 9/11, I had another near-death experience where I almost drowned. I was underwater for quite some time. And again, panic, but then I remembered you're supposed to relax and allow. And then, that's how you're able to find the surface, which is very unnatural when you feel like you're about to drown. And I did that, but I remember thinking, my life is just getting good. I know it's not my time yet. I have more to do. I have more to give. Same with recently when I've had, we have a very large history of lymphoma in my family, which is why one of my initial interests in longevity, in epigenetics, because I refuse to be a victim of my genetics. I refuse to be a victim of the life that society wants me to live. It's all kind of the same thing, right? Is that I've just decided, I know when I drop in, that I'm meant to pave the way, and it's not easy. I was listening to Jamie Kern-Lima speak recently at an event, and she created It Cosmetics, sold it to L'Oreal recently for over $1 billion. And she was saying, when you're a pioneer, when you're the first, people aren't going to understand you. People are going to tell you things like, you're crazy. Why would you move to New York to be an actress when you can be a doctor? Or, you're crazy. Why would you, create a fitness program that uses no weights and no jumps? You're crazy. No one's going to do that, right? And everyone's going to say those things. And if you allow that input to define you or to limit you, it's kind of on you. It's not on society. They're always making us smaller because they don't understand expansion. And that really hit me, because sometimes I wonder, why don't more people want to learn about longevity? Why is it so hard for people to stop drinking 8 diet sodas a day, when they realize how it would change their lives? And you realize that's what they've been conditioned to do. And our brain is literally wired for routine and the same and the same. And I think being a first to do things does take a lot of courage. And it doesn't have to be Broadway, and it doesn't have to be fitness celebrity. It can be having the courage to raise your kids with a different mindset than you were raised with, right? We are not a victim of our past. And that being said, of course, excluding major traumas and things like that are very real, of course, and have to be worked through. I think.
But I think even with those, though, even if you have major traumas, yes, those are physical moments in time that you can pinpoint an exact thing. My belief is almost that having a trauma like that often sets you up for success.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you can pinpoint where that moment was. And it's much easier because you have this this marker in your timeline, rather than saying, okay, I've had a privileged upbringing. I've been able to do X, Y, and Z. I'm where I want to be, but I'm not happy.
Yeah.
Or I'm not creating the life that I want to, because I don't know why. And you're trying to figure out that piece, but having that imprint, that specific moment, because I know with my mom, yes, it was the most challenging thing I've ever dealt with in my life, but B, it was the biggest blessing I've ever been given, because it gave me the tools, in a way, in order to prepare myself for what came next. And that's why I've now been able to show up in A, how I want to, B, be able to work through, and I don't really think we ever work through grief. I think is more of we expand into it, and it gives us a platform in order to lift ourselves up and raise up to the next level. But I think in all of that, having the ability to navigate on your own and learning the tools and the skills that something of that magnitude does for you. And it sounds very similar with you as well. The things that you placed yourself into these uncomfortable situations to like, I'm going to either jump into the deep end and drown, or I'm going to learn how to swim.
Yeah.
Is that it feels innate to you. Tell me or walk me through what I need to know about your childhood or your early life.
Oh, yeah.
That helps me better understand why you are the way you are today.
Yeah, that's so interesting because that's something I talked about in therapy too for a long time. It does.
Welcome to the shares.
Well, welcome to the shares. And, something that is always a question I ask people too, because it does very much shape. And to what you said, absolutely, I think one of my mantras, which is also a great book, is the obstacle is the way. What you just shared about the grief you experienced in losing your mom so young allows you to understand grief and process and help people, make decisions in their life to overcome these challenges because you've been through it, right? If I haven't been through things, how am I going to advise you on things, right? How am I going to talk to you about longevity when I'm 19 and eating Snickers bars and drinking Diet Orange Slice and thinking I'm crushing it in life because I'm still a size 4, nothing, not going to be of value. But as a child, for me, again, being a very creative, very emotional, very spiritual kind of child to very intellectual parents was its own obstacle, and they were very supportive, and my dad would always worry. He's like, oh, I worry about you. You're so sensitive and you're so emotional and so emotionally connected that, he was worried the world would hurt me because he saw me. No one's ever described me as logical. And I don't know if that's a compliment or not, but, no one's ever described me as practical. Resourceful, yes, I've had to be resourceful, but I lead with emotion. As a child, having parents who were logical and were practical, I think there was a challenge for me to feel like my feelings about things were understood. I'd never fully felt understood. And what's interesting, I grew up Catholic, and now I'm unilaterally spiritual. And my parents were always very liberal. They're like, look, we believe in God. That's great. We don't believe in the limitations the church puts on sex and other things, But to me as a child, I remember feeling, oh, why is everybody talking about God like they have to read about it in the Bible? Like, I remember being with God before I came here. Whatever word you use for God, like as a child, that's how I felt. I felt like this is part of who I am. This religion is separate from that. I don't need to talk to a priest to talk to God. I'm chatting with God over here and source energy and whatever word you use for it. But I think that, my mom is amazing. She's a pioneer of women. She got into medical school when women were not getting into medical school. She got her PhD in biology and microbiology when women were not doing that. She was one of one woman in her program back then. And she was born in 1950, and her parents wanted her. Why would you want to get an education? No man's going to want you. You have to learn to cook. You have to learn to sew. You have to learn to be a wife. And, no one's going to want you if you go to college. And she felt thwarted by that. So her way of loving me was constantly pushing me to be better. Like I was going to achieve straight A's. I was going to have high aspirations. I was going to win the national science fairs. I was going to also dance, also play the flute. I was going to be able to change a tire, drive in a no power steering truck. I was never going to be stranded on the side of the road or never have to get in a car with someone who was drinking. I was always going to be self-sufficient, right? And that served me very well in my achievements. But it did always make me feel like my butt could not hit a couch without being called lazy. Why aren't you practicing the flute? Why aren't you dancing ballet? Why aren't you studying, fill in the blank? And so what happened as a result is I graduated college, I'm successful, I'm thriving. I did not know how to relax or trust myself. And I based all of my self-worth on my achievements because that's how I felt. Now, as a child, you don't understand complex human emotion. Of course, my mom loved me no matter what. But it felt like as long as you're achieving, 2 thumbs up. You're doing great. But if you're not achieving, you're lazy. And I think finding the gray space in between that has been what my journey has been about and what's shaped what I like to share with people. And it goes back to how I felt when I was auditioning, right? I'm only as good as my next job. And if I'm getting rejected, I must not be talented, be worthy of love, enough, whatever word you want to put in there. And I think those are the things which are why, I created an affirmation meditation series as well as affirmation cards that are, I am worthy, I am awesome, I am enough, I am ready, because I wanted to separate my value from my achievements. I needed to separate my value from external validation, whether that was from my mom when I was young or casting directors when I was doing theater. And I think that's part of what shaped me. The other part of what shaped me is my dad, who was always very grounded, who would always listen to me when I would share my emotions and made my emotions feel validated. And I felt heard. And I think as a child, and then as I got older, I realized I deserved to be heard, and that following my passions was not just impractical, it was what I was meant to do. And I think so many of us allow ourselves to be programmed by society. You need to do this. You need to have a child by this age. You need to make this much money and have your picket fence and, have success, but not too much success because, we don't want that. And we live with these boundaries and we make choices because our parents made them or our friends are making them. And I want everyone to realize that if you are given a divine desire, there's a desire within you, it is there for a reason. And you are destined, you are designed to succeed in that area, And I think that's why the programming I do, I love it when moms and dads share it with their kids. A lot of my moms work out with their daughters and their young sons, and their young sons and young daughters will, when their mom or dad is feeling stressed, they'll say, oh, well, remember, Elise says you're enough. We did this meditation together and I know I'm enough. And things like that. I think if we can, from a young age, realize that we don't have to follow, there's rules to follow and rules to break. And what are they and how do they align with our core values?
And going back to the motherly and that kind of embodiment figure too, you being able to share that with mothers who are then able to impact their children, is you having a ripple effect on far more people than if you had on a child yourself.
Thank you. And that is really like what brings tears to my eyes. So I had a prenatal program called Pre and Postnatal Barre Blend, right? And that came out in 2020. So 4 years later, I am meeting these children who've done that at these, different, we have these different press events where people come and they're like, this is my Barre Blend baby. Like, she listened to you in the womb for 9 months. And what's so funny is, and my husband gets a kick out of this because I talk a lot, as you may have noticed. And he's like, sometimes he finds my voice to be a little irritating when he wants silence. But these kids hear my voice and they stop crying and they light up because they were hearing it in utero, and their moms often tell me, oh, we all find your voice so peaceful. And I always save those things and send them to Nolan. I'd be like, Nolan, see, most of the world finds my teaching voice very peaceful, but
you're the outlier here. So
exactly. You're the outlier here. Right. Yeah, it is the ripple effect that feels good.
And you talk a lot about doing and how society conditions us to always want to do more, achieve more, get more.
Yeah.
When was the first time in your life that you focused on being? Or when was the first time in your life that you took a breath for the first time?
Gosh, that's such a good question. And I think it's embarrassingly late in life, honestly.
Again, a condition.
Again, a condition, yeah.
Because saying embarrassingly late in life is then a condition saying that it should have been a certain way.
That's right. I guess what I mean by that is I would have loved to have discovered this earlier so I could have enjoyed it for longer. And that's what I want for others. I hope people who are listening in their 20s or teens, can have this breath, sooner and appreciate that space more. And I guess it's interesting, and this may validate the accomplishment thing, but when I did my first Broadway national tour, it was The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, starring Anne Margaret. And when those lights came on and I was on stage for 3,000 people, I felt alive. I felt free. I felt calm. I felt like this is where I'm meant to be. So yes, I had to get the job to have this experience, but I toured with that show for over a year. And every night when I would set foot on stage, it was a new experience. It reminded me and held me over in those times when I was between things. This feels safe. This feels relaxing. This feels aligned. And so then during the days, because, you're performing only at night, and after a certain point of time, you're not rehearsing as much because, you're in performance. And it was on the road. So we were in Vegas, we were in San Francisco. During those days when it was just me, because my friends are back home in New York, and, I had friends in the show, but I would just walk around and explore. It's also where my love of travel, began, because I felt at peace. I have a job, getting a paycheck. I only have to do it 3 hours a night. I come alive during those 3 hours. So during the day, I can breathe and I can walk around and wander. And I would love to wander. This is back in the days of maps. There was no phones with GPS. This is year 2001, I want to say. So, you had to print out your map quest. So I would just wander. I'd find out, okay, where's the one tourist attraction I want to see? And then I would wander around and just see what I felt like doing. And not having a timeline, not having a schedule is what felt free to me. But I think the way that I could do that as I took these baby steps was having an overarching series of, parameters in place. I have my morning routine. I know I'm going to perform at night. I know I have to get on a plane at this time. And so in between those, I could experience the freedom.
With a river without banks ceases to flow. So you gave yourself structure on the sides and then allowed the middle to flow.
Best analogy I've heard. I've never heard that one. And that is exactly what it was like.
I experienced that for the first time, the same time we met when we were in Morocco.
Oh, yeah.
When I had went and traveled to Europe. It was supposed to be for 2 months, ended up being almost 6. And having a very structured life. I'm very, as you can see, kind of like OCD, disciplined.
Yes. I need more of you in my life.
Rudimental, but on that trip itself, there was, I had clients that I was taking calls with at night, but then I didn't have things in the day, during the day, other than the morning workout I was going to go to. And that was the first time in my life I ever allowed myself to put in a podcast, go for a walk, see where I end up. And that has now become a staple in my day. And that's often where giving myself space to think and giving myself space to allow whatever's to come through has produced some of the best returns in my life, hands down.
Oh, yeah. Well, you were just sharing an experience with me this morning that we were together up in Malibu, just kind of doing a work session together and hanging out and brainstorming this podcast and things. An experience happened to you on the way home that you were just open to that then produced something amazing, right? And this is so true. And I feel like all of the best things in my life have happened, including meeting Nolan, when I wasn't looking for it. It was when I was really at peace after, I'd gotten married and divorced very young. And, I let him have his story about that. But for me, I upheld all my marriage vows. All of my partner's marriage vows were broken. I stayed because that's what I was taught, loyalty, until I realized, and again, my dad was like, Elise, you've lost 15 pounds. Your hair is falling out. Sad. He's like, loyalty is important, but so is reciprocity. And he's like, you need to look at saving yourself, And this is my dad, who's still married to my mom. They're going to be celebrating their 50-year anniversary. I thought for sure my dad was going to be like, well, you committed. And this was, again, my departure with organized religion as well, was religion says, stay, you have to stay. There's no divorce. No, that's not a thing, And it was really when I realized that I had the freedom to leave or to make my own decisions, that I was free, and these are very tough decisions to make, and again, kind of lead you where you need to go.
Sounds like your dad's been quite a voice of reason for you in your life as well.
He is, and he just, I think he gives me permission to be me and to release the limitations, that I think a lot of us are conditioned to put on ourselves. Like, we have to stay. There's the have to. And I think what I've been able to do lately is release. When I think of something, I should really do this. I really should do that. I change that narrative to, do I want to do that? Because honestly, when we've done the work and continue to do the work, I think our heart tells us what we want to do. And if we can really listen, there are days that you need to get out of bed and work out. And there are days that you need to rest and replenish. And we can't look outside ourselves to know that. We have to start to develop that understanding within.
You say your dad gave you permission to experience these things and feel the way that you presently do. With the women that you create programming for, all of the programs that you put out into the world, what are the things that you wish to give them permission to do?
Yes, all of the things that it took me 30 years to give myself permission to, I'd like them to experience that now. Number one is I want all women to realize they are the embodiment of magic and empowerment. If you go way back, tribes were matriarchal. Like women, people would revere women's life-giving abilities, right? This was magical. It still is such a miracle, right? And I think along the way, women have lost sight, getting back to the 90s and making yourself smaller and diminishing yourself so you're not offensive to people. I think the main thing I want for women is to understand that they are of value, that they have so much more inside them than the society that we grow up in here in the States tells them. So I want them to find that. And for me, there's kind of a secret sauce or a perfect way to do that. And that is through mindset work in movement. And I can talk about that a bit later. But what I want for these women is to realize they're capable of creating and optimizing a very healthy body that feels good. And that if you're living in a healthy body that feels good and allows you to live the life you want, you are at the aesthetic you need to be, and that is beautiful. We are not all going to look the same. We are not all aspiring to be a size 2. So I want women to take their value and their worth out of, conforming to whatever society says is beauty. In the 90s, it was heroin chic. Now you have to have a butt, you have to have boobs, you have to have lashes, you have to have all these things. Great if you want them, but you don't have to have that to be beautiful. So I want to redefine women's idea of beautiful as being confident, being healthy, sleeping well, feeling good, spending more moments in joy and contentment rather than pushing and pulling and forcing. And I think there's a time and place for achieving, but there's also a time and place for receiving. Like if we're so busy achieving things according to our plan, we're not leaving space to receive what we're meant to do. And I think also I want women, if your calling is to be a mom and you love that, that's awesome. That is of value. That is one of the highest callings. You don't have to be a CEO of your own business. You don't have to be an influencer. What you're doing and what you're drawn to do and what I want women to be able to identify what makes them come alive. Like that feeling I felt on stage, performing in shows. I thought that was the epitome until I lost my voice. My career ended with one doctor's visit. And I find what I'm doing now, and now this is the epitome. Now when I go on stage for, I think the most number was maybe 25,000 people live in the streets of St. Louis, as myself, showing up with 4 women behind me that they weren't anyone famous. They were just women who loved my program, so I invited them on stage with me. I was like, this is what I'm meant to do, and co-creating that experience with the live audience. And that synergy. So I thought I'd reached my peak, and then I'm like, oh no, now I'm where I'm meant to be. And maybe in 10 years, we'll have this conversation again. I'm like, oh, now is where I'm meant to be. So I want women to feel that. I want women to feel completely, I want them to know what makes them come alive and constantly be exploring that and knowing that we don't find it and stay there. We find it and then we continue to grow. And we're going to be called to higher and higher vibrations. So there's always going to be kind of a point where you feel, maybe I'm not aligning with the people in my life anymore. Maybe I'm letting my kids irritate me, or maybe I'm in this job and you know what? I'm not able to expand. What is next for me? And to know that answer comes from inside. And I realize it's weird as a fitness professional to not say, I want women to have great abs. I'm going to give you that, but that's a byproduct of the purpose.
It's fascinating, too, that you thought the greatest expression of who you were at the time on theater was through the portrayal of a character.
Yeah.
And then it shifted to fitness, where now the greatest expression of you is the portrayal of yourself authentically.
Exactly.
In the fitness modality.
Yeah.
And then we take the lens of that and we future pace it. What is that the greatest expression going to be then in 5, 10, 15 years. And that's the interesting piece to think about.
It is.
And when we shift kind of more towards the longevity piece, it's like, what are the inputs you're doing today that are going to dictate the future that you have? Because if you actually break it down, you're living your future that you thought of in the past right now.
Yeah.
So if you shift that into what am I doing today that's going to prepare me for who I'm going to be tomorrow, now we get into the longevity piece, we get into the health span piece, and we get into how can I optimize my inputs for quality of life in the future. Taking a break from this episode to remind you that your inputs matter. This show was created to help you build a high-performing, healthy, wealthy life. And if you feel that you're getting value from this episode, please go ahead and share it with someone who you feel would benefit as well. Now, fun fact, over 90% of our listenership is not actually subscribed to the show, so it would mean the world to me if you went ahead and tapped that subscribe button. Thank you for being here. Now back to the show. I want to double click on something that you said, which was the mindset and movement. What does that mean to you, and how do you program for that?
Such a great question, and I'll see if I can keep this concise. So what it means to me, there's a couple of things, right? And from the mindset work, I studied yoga, I studied philosophy, and lately I've been listening a lot to Dr. Joe Dispenza. There's a lot of, and also the holistic psychologist, and also Dr. Mark Hyman, right? These are all longevity experts, both in the physical and mental space. But one of the things that we now have neuroscience, testing and validation for, that when I was starting was just like a hippy-dippy yoga thing to say, is what we call neuroplasticity, right? We used to think that the conventional wisdom, and again, just like once everyone was convinced the earth was flat, and trying to convince people the earth was round was a nearly impossible task, and there were people who spent their whole lives refusing to believe it, right? Because it doesn't make sense. How is it round? I'm not falling on, and the same is true with this. And the idea is that we used to think by 22, your brain was your brain and you weren't capable kind of shifting your neurological pathways. And now we know we can. And two of the most direct ways physically to assist our body in doing that is breath work and movement. Now, it's something Dr. Joe Dispenza calls cognitive novelty. So cognitive novelty is if you sit around and you do squats over and over, and you do push-ups over and over, and you do your bicep curls over and over and over, that's not novelty. You're in a routine, and your body and your mind are conditioned. You have your left brain and your right brain, and we can get as nerdy as we want, right? But the right brain is our creative, our soulful, our energetic, our intuition, our gut, as you shared. And the left brain is logical, and it's conditioned for routine. And routine is comfort, and routine is safety. And this is back when we had to focus on our safety, because otherwise we'd get eaten by tigers, right? But now we, and this is not including physical abuse or a real dangerous situation where you need that fight or flight. But how I condition this mindset and movement is different, unique patterns of movement. I have to come up with names for them because they don't exist. I can't just say, let's do a squat to an overhead press. I have to say, let's take this external hip rotation to the right, bring it around, and now we're going to call this a bar blend rainbow or whatever it is. It goes back to being the first. It goes back to innovating and to pioneering. But if you are doing movement that is not familiar to you, that is not routine, that you don't know what's coming next, and you combine that with the mindset work, that is the optimal way and the fastest and most efficient way to create new neural pathways, to create cognitive novelty. And these have been proven to help us get into that space of, instead of being rooted in our past and the traumas and challenges and stories of our past, allow us to open up and delve into the left side of our brain, alpha and theta brain waves, to then create the future we want. So if I'm moving you in that direction, and at the same time, like I do in my programs, we either have an affirmation, or my most recent program, I started with I am affirmations in Barre Blend and progressed to MI questions in my Barre Blend Super Block, which is a 4-week program. Am I setting meaningful goals? And I will speak, once I get you set up in the move, I'm going to speak to that while you're doing the move, and you're having to be so present in what the move is, because it's not 18 squats or 19 burpees, that then your mind is actually ingesting that. Am I setting purposeful goals? Is my goal to be a size 2? Is that purposeful? Or is my goal to have a healthy body so that I can live in my purpose? And that's purposeful. And so that's the way that I take the science behind neuroplasticity and bring it into 25 years of experience. I'm certified everything from cycling to strength training to Pilates, yoga, barre. I've always been so curious about the human body, and because I have spent 20 years in getting classically trained in these modalities, it gives me the anatomical background to then get creative and have fun. And the way I come up with these programs is play. That's the answer. I get out my mat. I did this yesterday morning. I'm creating a new program now, and I turned on some whatever speaks to you. Also, a lot of longevity experts talk about music being the soundtrack of your life. I turn on music that brings me joy. For me, it's 90s hip hop. I've been at Hootie and the Blowfish, like you name it. People probably have no idea who these bands are. But I turn on music and I play. I get on my mat and I move. Sometimes I'll pick up things like, I'll pick up a dumbbell and move around with it, or I'll pick up something that's weighted like a sandbag and move around with it. And I'll videotape myself, and so I can remember, because in the moment I'm present and I'm not stopping to write things down. And I'll move in a way that makes my body feel empowered, mobile, functional. And then, comes the hard work of sequencing it so that everything's, as it's meant to be, and adding the mindset work. But I think play is key. Anyone can read textbooks and, create a fitness program that might lead to aesthetic results, but is not going to give you the mobility you want, the functional movement, the stability, the joint support, the spinal support. I take kind of all of those things and make it the way your body and mind want to move.
I love how everything that you've done in the past has uniquely prepared you for what's come next.
Yeah.
And how theater and being in the moment and allowing you to perform, and then the ballet piece as well, has allowed you to actually physically move your body in a way that feels good for you, and you get to play with it, and that's how you then create the programming from it. The piece that I'm interested in is most yoga, fitness, wellness professionals are told what to teach.
Oh, yeah.
They don't actually end up creating their own programming. Where did the idea that you were going to create your own programs and offer them come from?
I mean, this goes way back. So we're talking about 20 years ago. So when my theater career ended with a vocal injury, I had to go on vocal rest for 2 months, meaning no phonating my chords, like pen to paper if I wanted to order something at Starbucks. So I couldn't go to Broadway Dance Center or any of these places because I knew all the people, I knew the choreographers, and it's very hard for me not to talk, as you may or may not have noticed. But I walked by a yoga studio in Midtown, and there was a sign that said, I think it was like $90, 3 months unlimited yoga. I was like, I'm a dancer, a professional dancer. I could do yoga. I walk into an advanced class. I was like, what the heck is this, right? Immediately checked my ego, went to a basics level class. But I was really fortunate to have a mentor and teacher who ran Sonic Yoga, was the name of the studio. And now he's always been a thought leader, but now he's a rather famous one, Jonathan Fields. He's an amazing author and podcaster as well. And he had been injured, so he was not able to demonstrate any yoga moves. He would cue it verbally, and he would play music. And I had gone to other yoga classes before while on the road, and it was rigid and it was structured and there was no music and it was only Sanskrit. If you couldn't do a handstand, you were a major loser. And I was like, oh, I hate yoga. Yoga's awful and judgmental and limiting, and I don't want to do that. And Jonathan was just welcome, and he would play Grateful Dead. I mean, you name it, he'd play it. And for me, when I would flow, even though he was guiding the flow, I was having my own experience with the music, and I would cry, and I got out that mourning the end of my theater career, mourning the loss of what I thought my future was going to look like, which I've had to do in my divorce, in my fertility journey, in this moment I'm sharing. And when I got my certification, back then you had to do all kinds of things. There was a huge certification process. It took me probably 8 months. Now you can get yoga certified in a weekend. You learn 2 flows they teach you, and you don't understand why. So when I got trained, I had to understand the why. Jonathan, who was such a great leader, would say, okay, well, why? Why does this move transition into that move, and how is that good for you? And I would have to be able to explain. We had to dive deep into anatomy. We had to read the Bhagavad Gita and study Sanskrit. I had to teach a 90-minute class only in Sanskrit without ever demonstrating. So using my words and Sanskrit to flow, and then the breath work. For me, it was, there's every movement is attached to an inhale or an exhale. And so when I would experience it, it wasn't about making this yoga pose perfect. It was about the flow. And in the flows, even though they were, pretty traditional yoga flows, when I started doing them on my own, I would just be in the flow. And I'm sure you talk about it a lot in longevity and in work. If you're in a flow state because it's not like you black out, but suddenly you look at the clock, it's been 4 hours, you have no idea what you've done. That was me when I would practice yoga on my own. And I started to realize when I would drop in that I'm moving in all kinds of directions. So I got certified in Barre. I got certified in everything I could to learn more about the human body. And for me, when I would take classes, I would always move on to something different because I would get a little bored. Like, okay, this is the yoga flow. That's cool. But like done that, been there, unless you found really great teachers who were innovating. And I realized, I think it comes from dance too, choreography, right? You're always learning new choreography. While there's the Balanchine method of the Nutcracker, so you do that every year, it's the same. You also have guest choreographers, both in New York and in theater and in ballet. And they come and they just interpret music in a completely different way. And I was like, that's what I want to give in fitness. That's what's missing in fitness. In fitness, it's X number of squats, lunges, burpees, push-ups. That's all most people know. I know people my age who've never done a double external hip rotation and wonder why they have hip pain when they're 30, or wonder why they can't sit on a plane for 3 hours without having back spasms. And this is because they've never moved their body in a comprehensive, functional, circular manner. And it's probably because they've been told this works. They're in that left side of their brain, which is comfortable, routine. I'm going to do the same workout over and over and over and over because society tells me this is fitness. And I wanted to change that. So I think those are the things that combined to make me understand the value. And I've always wanted to innovate. And I think that was one thing that was limiting in theater. Every night was a different experience, but it's the same character. And it didn't give me space to innovate. I was looking at choreographers innovating, directors and writers could innovate. And as actors, there's a different way to innovate. But this allowed me space to someone called it, one of my friends when I launched my first program, called it Elise Unleashed. She's like, this is the first, they just gave you permission to freaking go. I was never micromanaged. That my director at the time, her name's Lisa Roth. She's now an Emmy-winning producer and director as she's moved on to the film and TV industry. She looked at me after day one. I'm like, okay, I have this crazy idea. We're going to do this. And she's like, yeah, go. And she would do all the movements with me. She's like, I've been in fitness for a long time. I've never done anything like this. And they didn't place limits on me. And I was like, surely at some point, someone's going to say that's not Barre. Or surely at some point, someone's going to say, yeah, that's not yoga. But they didn't. And, the people that naturally gravitate toward me are people like you who are highly intelligent, highly intuitive, highly creative, and I would say curious, and who are willing to get out of that routine that makes them comfortable. So I'm trying to get these sort of 50 to 60% of people who want routine, who want comfort, who like the same thing over and over again in their fitness to expand. No, they're going to probably fall over. They're probably going to be challenged. They may be pushed to the edge of almost giving up, but the mindset I give them is going to encourage them to come, and then the freedom in their body comes. Because so many of us have normalized pain. We've normalized being uncomfortable in our bodies. We've normalized being tight. We don't even know what our body is capable of. And this goes to longevity too. You're so used to, eating processed foods that what you consider normal, you feel fine, is actually sick, and what we're told, in this country, in the US, you're in the normal range, you're in the normal range. Well, I don't want to be in the normal range. I want to be in the optimized range. And when I teach fitness, that'll give you quads, but can you bend over and twist to pick up your child without a back twinge? Not if all you've been doing is heavy lifting, because you've never moved like that before. So I want to optimize your body. I want to optimize your mindset. I want to optimize your health. And I do this, I use myself as like my test guinea pig on everything, right? I'm 48. What happens when I cut out drinking? What happens when I move this way? And the aesthetic results are there, but they're there in 20 minutes a day with no equipment instead of hours at the gym.
You talk about a lot about innovation and how you've created things that people have never done before in order to get them to move in a holistic, mobile way.
Yes.
We live in a world where trends are very at the forefront, and there's always the next thing to do, the next diet that's going to get you somewhere.
Yeah.
How do you view innovation in regards to trends and longevity habits of things that have been around forever that are the healthy thing to do, as opposed to something that's like, this is the quick fix right now?
Yeah. Well, I think anyone selling you a quick fix right now is selling you snake oil, because this is all about consistency and time and investment and understanding. But you bring up a very good point. So what's interesting is that now everything I've been doing for many years is suddenly becoming trendy. I was telling people to embrace their physiques and not try to be a size 2 20 years ago when it was uncool, right? I was telling women, hey, you can move and get aesthetic results without doing 2-a-days. You can get cardio work without jumping and ruining your knees, And now, and I've been conditioning. I guess I started teaching and doing things in alignment with women's hormone health about, right around when I started my fertility journey with acupuncturists. So I was probably about 35. So what is that, 8 years? Now it's very trendy. Now everyone wants to do it, but they have different ways of doing it. So, I mean, trends come and go, and you can see everyone jumping on a bandwagon in some ways. And when I'm looking for my leaders or my mentors or my gurus, I don't want to see someone who reinvents themselves for whatever is trendy. And they used to teach this, but suddenly they're doing that. And this is prominent in the social media world, right? Because people catch on to trends and then want to capitalize on the trend. It's interesting because while I'm always innovating, my purpose and my teaching has always been the same for 20 years. You can use your body and nothing else to optimize your health and wellness. But mindset is key, breath work is key, movement and flow are key. And I mean flow in the literal sense. In the workouts I teach, there's no stopping for a water break. There's no you do this, then you rest for a minute, then you do another muscle group. You are working and using your whole body the whole time, and you do not stop till the end. So this is 30 minutes. That's how yoga is. There's no stopping. It's, you hold poses and you breathe in them, but it's a flow. And so I've always, for 20 years now, incorporated flow state and pitched this thing. And it's especially if we're getting into the differential between men's and women's health, right? Women have different needs at different phases of life, right? You're prenatal, you're postnatal, you're perimenopausal, you're postmenopausal, you're trying to get pregnant, you're trying not to get pregnant. And then also every month, a woman's body goes through a full cycle where your body has different needs during the luteal phase of your cycle than it does when you're ovulating, and different ways to optimize where you are and meet you where you are. And we don't need to be always doing 1,000 burpees or 1,000 bicep curls. And so I think it's important as we go through social media and we're told different things. Like I have a lot of women say to me, well, I'm told as we get older, we have to lift heavy weights. That is not true. You have to do progressive overload resistance training. Heavy weights is a very old school, very great way to do that. Heavy weights is an obvious way. You add weight, that's your progressive overload. But what women and people need is resistance training. And I do resistance training. All of my programs are hardcore resistance training. And our progressive overload is more time under tension and more resistance. So we add the resistance of gravity. If it's my Barre program, you add the resistance of infinity loops. But you are shaking and you are burning within 30 seconds. So the language is important. And just like in our mindset and in our longevity work, it's important how we speak about ourselves. Because how we speak about ourselves is a self-fulfilling prophecy, I believe. And how we speak about ourselves is going to contribute to how others perceive us. That's secondary to the fact that it contributes to how we perceive ourselves. And I think we have to be careful with our words. Because yes, heavy weightlifting is awesome. It's a great way to do progressive overload. And as a woman, if you're 60 and you just love lifting heavy weights and you've done it, great. I would argue it's not the optimal way. As we age, there's a better way to get resistance training, and you certainly should be doing this kind of mobility work if you are lifting weights. But saying we need heavy weights is different than saying we need progressive overload, we need resistance training. And again, all these forms of fitness are great. It's just there comes a point where maybe at 65, do you want to be doing 100 tuck jumps? I'm going to argue no. But I'm going to argue you still want to feel fit. You still want to have high cardio health. And I can give you that without the impact.
What's the simplest way to explain progressive overload?
Oh, okay. The simplest way to explain progressive overload, and this could go into our discussions about tracking analytics and things, is that you are not going to build muscle or progress if you're not adding on resistance or duration in some way. Meaning, if you're doing the same weightlifting routine and you never go up in weights, or you never go up in rest, or you never decrease your rest, you're never going to progress. You're going to stay right where you are at best, right? So that's progressive overload. You can add, you're overloading with either gravity and body weight, resistance loops, weights, number of reps, time under tension, duration, and that's how we progress. And it is important, if you want to be fit, that you progress your body in that way.
And then in line with that, how does someone figure out what is optimal for them? Because it varies person to person.
Oh, it varies person to person, and it varies for me every year. Every year what's optimal for me is different. It also depends on our goals. So it's a great question. It's somewhat of a complex question, and I would say the real answer comes down to body literacy, which is something I teach in my programs, which is understanding your own body, where it is. And one of the ways that I personally use my Whoop, which I happen to have on because I always wear it, but is there's strain, right? Strain is something we can measure. And I think we used to think more strain means more results. That is not true. I've always preached that was not true. And finally, the world is catching up, but you can burn yourself out. And particularly for women, our cortisol levels it directly impact, our sexual hormone health as well, right? So cortisol is what we call the stress hormone. So it is a hormone. And a lot of people think it just comes from mental stress. No, it comes from physical stress. And our body doesn't know the difference between good stress, like training, and bad stress, like running from tigers. So what happens is when women, particularly women, but all humans, but when women overtrain, when they're not getting recovery, when they're not recalibrating themselves, when they're not getting stretching, mobility, and functional training to go with the strain, which is the heavy weights or even the heavy resistance in my challenging programs, their cortisol levels spike and your body hears, uh-oh, we're stressed, we're running from danger, we have to save fat. And this is where, it's not a direct, but if women struggle with belly fat, especially as we get older, chances are it's cortisol causing our body to protect itself by creating that. And so, there's so many different needs, but if you can understand your body, what you feel, and listen, for example, today, coming here to do this podcast with you, I work out every day in some way. Today I woke up, I'm like, you know what? I've been working out really hard. I know my strain is high. This morning I'm going to do a 20-minute yoga flow. I'm not going to break a sweat. I'm not going to look at my analytics because I tend to not use my tracker to track calories burned, because in the kind of work I do, it doesn't reflect strength training. It's great for cardio, but it's not great for strength training. But I felt good. Instead of saying, oh, I need to really work out hard and break a sweat, today my body told me, you need recovery, you need stretch. And that's why I'm able to sit here for longer than I usually sit without hip pain or back pain, because I mobilize my body. So, how do you figure out if you're getting the optimal amount of work for you is really taking the time to understand your body. And that's what I do in my programs. I educate you about you because I know one size doesn't fit all. So every one of my programs has 3 levels: a modified, a mid-level, which is the main program, and then an intensified version. So if you want to go crazy today, I give you that option in a safe way. But then throughout one 30-minute class, you can choose, okay, I'm mid-level for this. Ooh, on that, I'm still working on my balance, so I'm going to modify. Oh, it's a time for a deep endurance hold. I'm going to intensify. And that's how you learn about what your body needs and how your body responds to fitness.
In regards to optimal specifically, and talking about the wearable that you have as well,
yeah,
what other things can people do, or do you do personally in terms of tracking, diagnostic, annual checks?
Oh, yeah.
Is there a specific protocol that you do yourself or that you would recommend people go through?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, and they vary in costs, right? As you know, as a longevity and biohacking expert, there are things that can cost tens of thousands of dollars and things we can do just with our own bodies. So I guess I would start with what's most readily available for us. And the thing that has become more important to me than anything is sleep and recovery. So the quality of our sleep is very important. I do wear a trackable device. And for me, again, I'm mostly using my device to track stress management, to track sleep, to track recovery, and to track peak performance. So for me, I don't want to walk around 365 days a year with shredded abs and super defined muscles, because the discipline it takes to do that means I would have no social life. I would have no indulgences, right? So there is a time and place for me, for example, when I shoot a program or when I shoot something for fitness, and it's not about the aesthetic. I need to have the endurance. I need to have the cardiovascular and pulmonary health. I need to be at peak performance, just like an Olympic athlete would peak their performance right before the Olympics. They don't walk around in that state. They know when to recover, they know when to replenish, and they know when to start building up to peak performance. So for me, I would say maybe twice a year when I'm filming something like that, I need to be at my peak performance so I can talk while making you breathless, right? And so I use my trackable device to do that. So I can enter, hey, April 18th, I need 2 weeks where I'm at my absolute physical, mental, and emotional peak. How do I get there? And it can help me create a plan, and it's not all strain all the time. Right now, as I'm so let's say it is April 15th, and now, I have a couple of months to get there. Right now, I'm not at optimal strain 6 days a week. Right now, I'm alternating days. And then I notice my body gets stronger, and suddenly, working out a little less, I notice my muscles get more defined. I'm working out more intentionally. Stress management is key. Stress management is key, and it's challenging. What is something we can do that's really easy? My programs all include breath work that helps stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system to get you out of that routine brainwave and into the present moment. Another easy thing, gratitude lists. These are things that are free and easy to do. I wake up in the morning. It can be mental. I happen to journal it. 5 ways abundance is currently in my life, right? How can I ask for more abundance if I'm not satisfied with the abundance I have, right? So those are a few easy things for stress management. And then sleep is so important. There's 1,000 ways you can, improve your sleep. When and how you work out is one. But really prioritizing getting enough sleep impacts everything. It's my biggest hack to weight loss, and it's my biggest hack to peaking performance.
Interesting you say that too, because that's one of the biggest things that we've seen with the longevity clinic in Costa as well.
Oh, is it? Yeah.
Is everyone's coming in saying, do you have this technology or do you have this latest and greatest thing?
Yeah.
But have we optimized your sleep, your nutrition, as well as your exercise?
1,000%.
Because those three things are going to be 95%. And I would say sleep is probably 70% of that 95%.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting as I've delved into longevity, right? I mean, there's different, arguably, but there's usually 6 agreed upon principles of longevity, right? And it goes in variable order of importance, those first 3 you just mentioned, right? So we have nutrition, fitness, and sleep, right? And then we go on to more the mental acuity is one of the keys to longevity, purpose and community, right? So another thing I do is I create a community on Instagram. I have a subscriber community. Through all of my programming for body, I've created a community. And purpose, everything we've talked about up until now. What is your purpose? What is your passion? What makes you come alive? Another key to longevity. But as you say, there's so much we can do in the longevity or biohacking space that has nothing to do with the latest technology. You listed 3 of them. The other thing is, a lot of people are going to give you advice about this or that. Have you cut out processed foods? Have you cut out added sugar? Or not even cut out. Have you cut back on them? One of the best ways to improve your sleep is, starting a fast at least 2 hours before you go to bed. And the reason is not to go 16 hours without food, but the reason is that, when you're sleeping, and this is through my work, I was with Fitbit for a long time and helped them track sleep. And what happens, right, especially for women, your optimal hormone replenishment and renewal, and again, through multiple hormone certifications, 11 p.m. to 1 p.m. And of course, there's different studies. But during that time, you don't want your body digesting food you ate at 9 p.m. You want your body to be giving all of its resources to regenerating, realigning, and elevating your hormone health. So if you stop eating a few hours before you go to sleep, when you go to sleep, your body can use its energy for all the things we want it to. Elevating our HRV, right? Our heart rate variability. In the fitness world in the past, everyone focuses on how high is your heart rate when you're working out. Okay, great. But what we've learned recently is that our heart rate variability is a much more impactful number on our health span and our longevity span. And that includes how long are the spaces between our heartbeats when we're sleeping. And that is greatly impacted by sleep hygiene, all of which you do in Costa Rica. Going to Costa Rica in and of itself, there's no city sounds. Maybe you're unplugging your phone. It's a beautiful, relaxing environment. There's so many ways to optimize sleep, and I would say it's the number one use of my tracker. I don't believe in calorie tracking on here because I know for my programs it's not accurate. It could never explain the levels of increase in your resting metabolic rate when you build muscle, for example. So it's going to show you burn more calories when you're running on a treadmill, but when you're running on a treadmill, at least if it's still, you're not really building more muscle. There's no progressive overload. So things like that. But for sleep, it's important. And, I think we hear a lot about like hyperbaric chambers and oxygen therapy and stem cells. And yeah, those are all great. And I do believe, as you and I have talked about, in the next 10 years, a lot of those things will become more cost effective. But there's super easy things you can do right away. The average American diet is like 75% processed foods. And the average American who thinks they're eating healthy isn't, because of how we market and what the FDA approves of here in the country. And something could be marketed as all natural or organic. But if you really dive into it, that's not the case, right? It's just really, really effective marketing.
How do you view, so I personally work out more for the mental benefits than the physical. And I get that from pushing myself to an edge.
Oh, yeah.
But the thing is, if we're talking about the optimal way in order to work out, isn't necessarily pushing yourself for an hour, hour and a half every single day, 7 days a week.
Right.
What or how do you view optimizing for the mental piece of it through the lens of where I want to break a sweat each morning, but that may not be the best thing for my physical body?
Yeah, well, what I do is, and what I love about what I get to create for Beachbody, is that I create a program, meaning it's 3 weeks, it's 8 weeks, it's 12 weeks, however long the program is. So it's designed to take you on this very specific journey. But don't get it twisted. I love working at my edge. I just do it efficiently, and I create workouts that do it efficiently for people. So we used to think, back when I was teaching at Equinox, so let's say 2006-ish, it was the 2-a-days. You had to do 1 hour of high energy cardio, and then you had to do 1 hour of strength training, right? Now, I believe the key to optimization is HIIT training, which is high intensity interval training, not to be confused with high impact interval training. And the key word there is intervals. You have to go up and down and up and down. The way that you can really work to your edge in a peak interval is that you really recover during the intermittent intervals, right? So every program I have created for Body, formerly Beachbody, I say that because not a lot of people know we've rebranded from Beachbody to Body. But the way that every single workout I've ever done, whether it's yoga or barre, unless it's a recovery specific workout, which I do have some yoga for recovery, it's HIIT training. There's cardiovascular work, there's strength training, and I'm going to peak you where you go to the edge to the point where every muscle in your body is shaking. And then you're going to do a quick 30-second, 1 minute recovery. And then you're going to do a cardio interval that's low impact or no impact, but elevates your heart rate to its optimal level. But you're going to do that 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. Doesn't have to be Monday through Friday. You can take your 2 rest days whenever you want. And by a rest day doesn't mean you stay in bed. On rest days, for example, I walk my dogs, I go on hikes, I will go for a swim in the ocean. I have created some cycle rides that are designed to keep you in zone 2. They're meditative cycle rides. But yes, I think the mindset for me in these 30 minutes, and believe me, I've done all kinds of fitness for all kinds of years. Someone once said, I'm recently been working on this idea of 20-minute body weight only flows. And I use the word flow generally because I will incorporate elements of yoga, barre, mixed martial arts, primal movements to optimize body's mobility and functionality. But in 20 minutes, getting you to that point where you are at your edge. And it's actually the fact that it's only 20 minutes makes you work a little harder, but people have described it as a 45-minute workout in 20 minutes because there's no breaks, but I'm taking you on this interval journey in that 20 minutes. So in answer to your question, most people need multiple breaks during one of my 30-minute workouts, but I want it to be efficient. And a lot of trainers also, this is mobility day. This is upper body strength day. This is lower body strength day. And if you're doing heavy weights, you need to isolate different body parts and give body parts a rest. In mind body work like I do, it's every day's full body day, every day's booty day, every day's core day, every day's leg day, every day's cardio interval day. But I make it so efficient that that's all you need. And then on your rest days can be what you want them to be.
Had to pick one exercise to do every single day, what would it be?
Just one movement?
One movement.
Like as the dancer in me can't do that. But I guess I think I do know. Well, I mean, it's like a kind of a sequence I created, but I think we all need double external hip rotation. So it's what would be called, and what's interesting about this one position is it's in almost every modality, just called different things. In fitness, it's called a sumo squat. In yoga, it's called goddess pose. In Barre, it's called second position. And it is a double external hip rotation where you keep your hips under your shoulders and you come down to a turned out squat, right? And what that does, it gives you hip opening, it gives you low back support, a ton of core work, inner thighs, outer thighs. A lot of us focus on the importance of our glute max, which we should, but we neglect the importance of our glute medius and minimus, right? Our adductors and abductors. So it gives you all of that, and you don't need any heavy weights. If you do little 1-inch pulses at the deepest part of that squat for you, add some calf raises, and then I would say, because I'm a flow person, you take that, you turn your whole body to the right, you do a double bent knee lunge, open back up to second, double bent knee lunge the other way. You do that, you're getting absolutely everything you need in one flow. You add progressive overload by keeping it low, and you can add rest by straightening the legs in between. But that basically gives your body everything you need in that 2-move sequence.
When you first got here today, you said something that a term I'd never heard before, which is age positive.
Oh, age positivity, yes.
And in relation to that, and you're very open and vocal about your age.
Yeah.
How are you not about to be? We got a year and a half to go. I'm not gonna future pace you. Not gonna future pace you here. But as you are aging, how are you viewing longevity for yourself?
Yeah, I view it as my life getting better every single year. So I am 48 and a half. So my husband's already planning my 50th birthday party. Maybe in Costa Rica, right? That's the plan. I'll manifest that for me. But I view longevity as the opportunity to make every year my best year. I refuse to be eliminated. I get exhausted when people tell me the best years of my life are behind me. I'm like, no, you've made the choice to say that the best years of your life are behind you. For me, I honestly feel healthier physically, mentally, and emotionally every year. And I view longevity as feeling better every year, being capable of more every year, and enjoying my life more every year. And when I talk about age positivity, body positivity and all of these things, but one of the things that hasn't really been necessarily modeled for us until recently is women aging, right? And, we have Don Lemon getting canceled, and we have all these things happening now. Last year at the Oscars, all 3 of the major categories in acting were won by women over 40, men over 40. So that's a very exciting thing to see happening. But, early in my career, as a woman in theater and then in fitness, it has been told to me over and over and over again, youth is imperative. You have to stay young. You have to look young. You have to do this, do whatever it takes to stay young, lie about your age to stay young. No. Now, when I turned 40, I started outward messaging my age. And I was advised by many people who care about me, you shouldn't do that. You don't look 40. You don't tell them you're 40. I'm like, F that. I'm doing the fact that I'm 40 and I am able to optimize my health. I mean, look, I'm not going to listen to some 20-year-old tell me how I can look good in 20 minutes. You can look good in 20 minutes waking up in the morning when you're 20. Okay, being 40 and having an optimized body and, moving toward a physique that is both aesthetically good, but more importantly, feels good and healthy, I think is more empowering. I'm now 48 and, I don't have Botox in my face. I don't have fillers. I empower women to do all the things that make them feel good. But I'm like, what if we can repurpose beauty as not 50-year-olds trying to look 20, but 50-year-olds embracing their longevity? And I think I still feel like I look very young, and maybe that's a myth I tell myself. But the reason I feel that way is I feel more empowered. I feel more confident. I think joy shows on your face and in your complexion. Unless I'm being filmed and need to powder down for lights, I don't wear makeup aside from mascara and lip balm, which I think makes my skin feel and look good. But really, the sleep, the hydration, the movement of my body, the epigenetics of regenerating cells that support that and doing the longevity work that we've talked about that's free and within our power to do helps with youthfulness so much more than Botox or fillers or lip injections ever will. And I think if we can invest in this idea that beauty isn't limited to women under 35 or who look like they're under 35, beauty is women in their confidence, in their power, women embracing this idea of longevity. And I basically refuse to age. I don't tell myself the story that, soon it's time to start wearing muumuus and cutting my hair real short and walking around in my slippers all day like the Golden Girls, because that's what old women do. And now I've started to know my friend Lacey, who's amazing, and she's an incredible trainer as well. And she's like, you know what I've started doing? I've started asking people, hey, how young are you? Instead of how old are you? And I love that. So when people ask how young I am, I'll be like, actually, or how old I am, I'll say, actually, I'm 48 years young. And now I've started asking people, how young are you? And, we are able to now do these biological tests where you can test your biological age, which is often different from your chronological age. And I did this through my hormone specialist here. It's a series of blood work. Many Americans are 2 to 8 years. Their biological age is 2 to 8 years older than their chronological age. I will share, and this is because it's science. I'm 48 and my biological age is 31. I feel like that's great. And next year, actually, Kevin, I'm going to make you a deal. When I'm 50, I want my biological age to be 28. That's my goal, 28 or 27. I want my biological age to go down as my chronological age goes up. And again, I have the luxury of, getting to do a contrast therapy with you, getting to do some of the things that are, that you have to be privileged to do. It's a shame, but as a woman, to get hormone tests, you have to be privileged. It's not covered by insurance. So I'm aware of that. But I would say 80% of what I do is sleep, movement, nutrition, purpose, right? Being of service. I think, again, it's one of those things when I get down or when I feel out of control, any of us can look in the world right now and be depleted. It is very challenging to watch the news. It's very challenging to see the dissent that's happening and the wars that are happening. And you can either choose to go down the spiral of that and feel more and more out of control, or you can take control and help where you can. And while, I can donate money and things to things happening in Gaza, what can I do with my community? What can I do in my life that helps people who then help people who then shape the next generation? And it's all of value. So I think the other longevity thing I like to practice is that purpose and that community and that service, which is an important part.
And it sounds like changing the narrative as well.
Oh, yeah. You have to. We have to change how we think about ourselves and how we speak about ourselves. And when I started powerfully out messaging my age as a badge of honor, instead of hiding my age as, a shameful secret, suddenly I feel like I look younger now. You know how Instagram very lovingly or Facebook will say, here's what you posted 10 years ago. And sometimes you're like, why would you remind me of that boyfriend or whatever it was, right? Now I've been with my husband 10 years, so I don't get those. But I look and I honestly think I look and feel younger now than I did 10 years ago. And I think a lot of that is these longevity practices that have nothing to do with the physical surface and everything to do with how we treat our bodies and minds.
I feel the same too. I feel like the older I've gotten, the younger I actually feel.
Yes.
And that's because the mindset has shifted towards what I'm grateful for and able to do presently, rather than what I'm striving to get to, because I feel that I'm existing in a state of lack where I wasn't in the past.
Absolutely. And you said something earlier today, and this is why I always love our conversations. This podcast could be 18 hours and split into 5 different podcasts. But you said something earlier today at a point where there was a point in your life where you weren't financially where you wanted to be, but you want to live like the person you want to be, right? So I stay young in my energy. I stay young in my attitudes. I surround myself with people who lift me up, who make me feel good, who want my success. I used to feel like if I was friends with people for so many years, I owed it to them to stay friends with them, even though they would drain me or they would pull me down or they wouldn't reciprocate that friendship in a way that felt empowering, or they weren't relating to my growth. And it's like, wait. And as soon as I released that and allowed myself to move toward who I want to be is a woman who celebrates other women. So why am I going to spend my time or energy on people who don't? I want to be around people, who are thought leaders, who are innovators, who are pioneers, who are helping people of all means and all ages be their best, right? So I think that's so true. And you said, I want to live like the person I want to be. So I will do that too. I will dress for the job I want. I will show up as my best self. Even when, I have moments I don't feel confident. I have moments, we have insecurities and it creep up. But I think, well, what would my highest self, what would my most confident self do or wear or be in this moment? And that is, again, how we curate more abundance, gratitude for abundance we have, and living in the mentality of the person we want to be. Yeah.
And you're future pacing who you want to be by allowing your body to feel that state presently.
Absolutely. And that's such an interesting thing. And that's what, being supernatural, Dr. Joe Dispenza also, I recently listened to Super Attractor by Gabby Bernstein. And these are all very common books. Probably most of your listeners have listened. But especially Dr. Joe Dispenza, he does it from a scientific aspect, and Gabby does it from an emotional, experiential aspect. But the idea is your brain and your body don't know the difference between memories and feelings that you incorporate. So if you have a high vibe feeling, your body and your cells align with that. If you're constantly doom scrolling or you're hate scrolling or all of these things we do, because it is drama is addictive. A lot of neurological studies show, especially in the age of social media, you start scrolling, you start comparing, you start thinking you're less than, you start getting mad at people, you start resenting other people's success because to you it seems like the scarcity mindset of their success means less for you. And your body responds to that, and that becomes your journey. And we need to repurpose that. And if we can live in good feeling emotions, that's why I play songs that lift me up. I spend time around people that lift me up. My body feels energized. My emotions are positive and high. Those vibrations lift me on a cellular vibration. So this is not just me being a hippy dippy, longevity believer. In becoming supernatural, he gives the scientific evidence for this. And that, again, epigenetics that you don't need a barometric chamber for. Epigenetic work that you can do through breath, through mindset, through joy, through music. Easy.
The most fascinating part that I've discovered in all of that too, and we'll start to wrap up because I know we could go for 4.5 hours here, but is that, it kind of goes to as why social media can have such a negative impact.
Oh, yeah.
There was a study done that the neurobiological response to a perceived experience on social media was stronger than if you actually had that experience in real life. They tested it with the Boston Marathon bombing.
Did they?
Mm-hmm. And the people that viewed it through social media had a larger and stronger response than the people who experienced it in real life.
Wow, that's insane. And this is where being age positive is helpful to me because I didn't grow up with social media. I didn't have it in my 20s. Facebook came out, I was already in my 30s. So for me, it's not a super ingrained part of my life. Now I do use social media for my business, so I have to be mindful. I'll block you faster than you can say good morning, and I will mute you if you trigger me, right? So I've learned, again, I'm get to be in control of my inputs only. I get to decide. I'm not going to let social media decide what I see the first time I tune in. But for me, even for business, I don't open up my social media to do a post until I've been awake for 2 hours. And I've done my Whoop analytics, I've done my journaling, all of my morning routine, and I go into that a lot on my social media. But, I feel, I don't want to say sad, but I feel that a generation that grows up with social media being a huge part of how they interact with one another, they're going to be more challenged in this way, right? For me, social media is still a bit of a novelty. It's not how I relate to others. I still call people on the phone, I still remember a time where, there was no call waiting. So you had to tell your mom and dad, don't go on the phone, a boy might call me, But I think for society, so much of us ingest our reality through social media. And, you used to, when I was a kid, there was the 6 o'clock p.m. news and the 7 a.m. local news, and that was it. There was no CNN. There was no 24-hour news circuit where they have to fill all their time with drama. There was no social media where then it starts to align with what you believe, and then you become only this one-sided, conspiracy theorist. it's really called programming for a reason, right? These apps are designed to keep you on there. CNN and Fox News and all these 24-hour channels, no matter what you believe, it's dangerous to stay on for 24 hours ingesting bad news, which is their job to bring, right? So you have to be mindful of that. Being educated, yes, I consume my news now by reading the New York Times. Yes, I've lived in LA for like 18 years. I still get the New York Times delivered. I do have the app, but I like the paper. So I definitely get Saturday and Sunday in paper form. But I just cannot ingest the news passively, because you have these visceral reactions. And social media is even worse because it's short snippets. Our attention span is getting shorter and shorter and shorter and more, as you say, dramatic, right? And I very rarely see people neutrally scrolling. They start to get agitated or they start to get numb, right? And it's a numbing mechanism if you're not feeling your feelings. And these are... It programs you to think a certain way and be a certain way and rely on, you need this drug, you need this product, or you're going to fail, and they're indoctrinating you in that way because they're trying to sell something. And it's hard, Our minds are designed to be influenced.
Well, Elise, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. What input has provided the biggest return for you? What singular input provided the biggest return in your life?
I think the biggest singular input that has had an impact on my life. You mean an input from an outside source, like that doesn't come from within? Okay, I'm going to say that the input the input that's had the most impact on my life, I think, has come from within me. I think it's the input of trusting what I feel and what I desire as what is my destiny, and inputting that into my mind, which wants to think otherwise. So kind of, the input of my gut instincts, my feminine intuition, and my desires, knowing that they are placed within me to fulfill.
Love that. And closing tradition for the podcast, what is your most gifted book?
Oh, that I gift to others the most? The Obstacle is the Way. I think it comes full circle to what we talked about earlier, because no one's gone through life without obstacles. And if you turn it into an opportunity, I think you can really watch your life take off.
Yeah. Full circle moment.
Full circle.
In a great way. Well, Elise, this has been a pleasure. I think the biggest things today was learning the obstacle is the way for both of us. And B, everything that you have done in your life has uniquely prepared you for what has come next. And when you take a step back to allow yourself to not try and control the outcome and allow yourself to be present and aligned and fulfilled in the moment, you're no longer limited by your own imagination. And that's a fascinating thing and something that has taken you to an incredible place. So thank you for being here with me.
Thank you for having me, Kevin. This has been, I think, my favorite podcast to date.
There we go. Check. Log that one in the books.
Validation, testimonial.
Awesome, Elise. Thank you.
Thank you.